This week, we've got two very eventful races in Miami to talk about, yet another lap one incident, and lots of Lego. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Back at the Grid. I'm Chris, joined as ever by Tom.
Hello.
And we're here to discuss what was a pretty entertaining weekend in Miami. I think we've kind of come to expect not much from this track, but...
Yeah, I think it's partly down to how close the general grid is this season, other than maybe McLaren. But I think it's partly down to how close the rest of the grid actually is. But it produced much better racing than we thought it might do, given previous Miami races, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the Grand Prix was kind of a bit of a two halves thing. The first half was very entertaining, action-packed, and then it kind of had a bit of a lull towards the end. Carlos Sainz tried his best to spice things up at the end, but we'll get there.
Yeah.
We'll start with McLaren, though. Didn't really have their way in either qualifying session, but come race trim, they were just untouchable, weren't they? I mean, Piastri had a 37-second lead over the next non-McLaren car at the end of the Grand Prix, which is that's levels of dominance we've not seen in a couple of years since Red Bull won all but one race a couple of years ago.
Yeah, height of Red Bull max dominance and height of Mercedes dominance in the early hybrid areas. That's kind of where that sits in terms of pace compared to the rest of the grid. Just a whole step above everybody else, I think.
Yeah.
And obviously you got to remember Piastri started that race in fourth. It's not like he started on the front row of the grid and disappeared. He had to fight a couple of non-McLaren drivers for the positions that he got. So
yeah, I mean, how big would that gap have been if that was from pole? Probably pushing 50 seconds by the end, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, potentially.
The sprint race went to Norris after he sort of got fortunate with the safety car timing in a very chaotic, wet, dry sprint race. Super entertaining, though. The sprint race was one of the better ones we've had, I think.
Yeah.
Really enjoyable. But yeah, Grand Prix went Piastri's way after yet another Norris Verstappen incident, which Piastri was able to take advantage of to jump up to second. I mean, before we get into that less good stuff, he took the lead from Max in a fantastic fight over the course of 3 or 4 laps, I think it was. Just such good racing between Oscar and Max.
Yeah. And I think the way that he did it was probably the best way. You saw Hamilton do it earlier in the race, that whole force the car ahead to defend the inside so that you can get that switch back on it from the outside. And I think that was ultimately the best way to attack people into turn one, just because it was a little bit almost dirty, wasn't it, on that inside line? People were
dust being kicked
locking up
crazy
on there and trying to and struggling to get the car stopped on there. So selling the defending driver to that inside line and then actually letting them outbrake themselves and get that undercut. It was a move that both Hamilton and Piastri pulled off very, very well. And I think as well, that's maybe why, it's one of the reasons I think Norris, again, took a little bit longer to get past than Piastri, because he had almost the same setup. Watching it at the time, you sat there thinking, right, rinse and repeat, get on that outside, force him to defend the inside and get that switch back. But for some reason, Norris decided to continue around the outside, and you immediately saw why that wasn't viable. He went too deep himself and didn't get that switch back, and then that meant that it was just a few more laps and another different scenario that Norris was going to have to fight for to be able to get past. So, yeah, I think that was his key chance. That was clearly the way to make the best of turn one anyway, if that's how people are going to do it. Get that run onto the start-finish straight, and then the the switch back from the outside. But yeah, Piastri and Hamilton were probably the two that pulled that off the best through the weekend.
Yeah. It's interesting watching Max fighting Norris and Piastri and how those two combination of drivers always seem to pan out differently. I don't know if it's just because there's so much history between Norris and Verstappen fighting on track, whereas Piastri just kind of, him racing Max is a fairly recent development, and he just kind of treats it like anyone else and gets on with it. Whereas I feel like with Lando and Max, there's always like, is it going to be a repeat of this? There's just a bit more baggage there. And I think they both approach fighting each other a little bit differently, maybe.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, as well, there's maybe an argument to say that Lando and Max have raced with each other so much in an online setting as well that they just know what the other's thinking pretty much all the time, whereas Oscar's a little bit more of an unknown in that sense. So Max is having to actually almost guess what Oscar's going to do, and Oscar knows that Max hasn't got that insider info to some degree. So maybe there's an element of that as well, that they've just in general not raced each other that much. But it's interesting to see it play out. I mean, obviously Norris eventually got the job done, but he had to do it somewhere different. Like once Max had got done by Oscar and nearly got done by Lando in the same way, he didn't let that happen again. Like, he very heavily defended more the middle of the circuit at that point into turn one, where it was impossible to essentially attack him either side, and it just became a thing. So he had to find another way around. But again, it's one of those things where it slowed Lando down again. Like, Lando could have potentially had a bit of a better result, maybe been right on Oscar's tail to make some difficult decisions about, do they let him fight and so on, but held up behind Max a little bit too long because of not being able to get the move done or get the decision right. But it's just something we see a little bit from Lando this season.
Because, I mean, we don't know if and how much Piastri was managing in that final stint, but Norris did take big chunks out of his lead in that closing stint. And, in the end, it was 4.6 seconds. Had he lost less time behind Verstappen, maybe he could have closed that gap up. Like, we'll never know for sure, but I think that definitely gave Piastri a slightly easier time of leading that race.
Yeah, definitely.
But I mean, it kind of came down again to that first. Well, I guess it was technically turn 2 incident between Max and Lando. Max kind of went in a little bit deep to turn 1, locked up slightly and opened up the inside line, and then I mean, did he squeeze Lando off the track? Did he have a snap of oversteer? I mean, if you watch Max's onboard, there's not like that telltale like rev spike when someone does have a snap of oversteer, but the stewards weren't particularly interested. They sort of just put it as a no further investigation.
Yeah, it's one of those where it's very elbows out from Max, like you'd expect. But that's why I also sort of think that Lando should have kind of seen that coming. Like, he knows where the racing line is. He knows where Max is going to want to be. And he, in an ideal world, he needs to just concede that, I think, to some degree. Like, yes, Max could leave him more space, but I don't think there's anything egregious going on there or anything like that. And Lando's far enough behind at the time that it's not like he's like forcibly shoving him off the track or anything like that. I think Lando's at a position where Max is entitled to some room from the other side, because bearing in mind he's got Antonelli on the other side of him pushing him across that way as well. Maybe not to the same extent, but he is having to think about the fact that there is a car either side as well.
He didn't have a ton of options.
No, exactly. So I think it being a racing incident is fair enough, to be honest, in this occasion.
And I think it just sort of felt like Lando was trying to win the race at turn 1. And with the car they've got right now, he didn't need to do that. He could have backed off, slotted into second, and probably got past Max fairly quickly. I mean, he took Oscar until lap 11 or 12, I think it was, to get past. There's only one car really on the grid that Lando is going to have a really difficult time passing, and that's his teammates.
Yeah.
I think he needs to be focusing at these race starts on just being ahead of Oscar. Everyone else they can deal with, but Oscar's the one he really needs to be positioning himself against.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, as we said, McLaren 1-2. Interestingly, this is the first time a team has ever had a 1-2 in the sprint and Grand Prix on the same weekend.
Wow.
Which pretty impressive.
I've got an interesting one for you that I heard over the weekend, which I haven't fact checked this yet, but I'm assuming it's going to be right because it came from official broadcasting. This is the first time a McLaren driver has won 3 races in a row since Mika Hakkinen in 1998.
I heard that as
well. Which was wild to me.
Crazy stat, yeah.
Absolutely wild.
Piastri's also won more races than Norris now as well. Yeah. In terms of the championship, the gap is still only 16 points, which is nothing. Like that can disappear very, very quickly. So still very much open, even though the momentum definitely seems to be with Piastri at the moment.
Yeah.
But I guess the sprint race kind of minimised some of the damage a bit.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, in the grand scheme of things, if we'd not had the safety car, it was Alonso getting punted around, wasn't it? By, I want to say Doohan. I feel like it was one of the Alpines at least.
Yeah.
But Alonso getting punted into the wall and being unretrievable. Oh, it was Lawson. Sorry, I saw pink. I'm being told in chat it was Lawson. Pink threw me off. But yeah, basically him getting punted around essentially gave the victory to Norris, didn't it? It was all about who got to that safety car line at the pit exit first, and Norris just managed it, and then that was pretty much race done. We kind of knew that was going to be the case. Which annoyingly they were talking about on commentary, and all we saw was an F1 TV an F1 logo transition screen. I think that was one of the many. There were like 3 occasions this weekend where we were watching something heat up, getting to a point, and then they tried to transition away to something else, and you just got the big F1 thing, and it's like, why are you cutting away from that? Like, that is what we want to see. And then they were going to like something just completely random. It was like an onboard of the safety car or something. I can't remember what they went to, but it was just like, why have you cut away?
In Monaco.
Yeah, they were literally on board with Lando coming out of the pits to see who made the line first, and then it went to like an F1 transition, and then to some other camera that wasn't even relevant. I forgot what the other one was. There was another like overtake coming, like one of the battles during the Grand Prix, and as the battle was heating up, it just went to an F1 logo, and it's like, why are you doing this?
Yeah, it's in qualifying as well. Like there was one point where they showed an entire Hamilton lap on board, and while it was happening, you were seeing the split times from Piastri, Norris, Verstappen, Antonelli, Russell, all like trading fastest sectors, and we just spent the entire lap watching Hamilton's on board. Like, what are we doing? Why are we not seeing any of the front runners at this point? It was, like I hate to just keep banging on about this, but the TV direction's been real bad this year.
It's been bad this season, hasn't it?
Yeah. We'll move on to Mercedes. Kimi Antonelli, sprint pole. That was a phenomenal lap.
Did a great job.
Super impressive from him. Unfortunately, he didn't even get around turn 1. Bit of a mess into turn 1, a lock up. Lost 3 places. He then lost even more places because Red Bull released Verstappen into his path and basically gave him a drive-through penalty because he couldn't get into his pit box, which was unfortunate for him. Still finished 7th, so picks up a couple of points in the sprint. But just to be on pole was like so impressive, and seeing like the reaction from the team and everything was just really nice. I love the relationship him and Bono are forming as well, because like we had years of Hamilton and Bono being very much like, pally and like, really getting on well as kind of friends. But now with Kimi, it's almost like a bit more of a paternal relationship almost, but like it's really nice to see. Like he's calling him lad a lot. Like it's really nice. And then he was third on the grid for the Grand Prix as well, which was also super impressive. He dropped down to fifth, but still really good weekend for Antonelli. Like, I think this weekend has just sort of shown kind of what we already knew, but it's kind of put us into focus that he's got lots to learn. Like his racecraft was ropey at times. His defense against people trying to pass him was not great. You know, he missed corners a few times, but the out and out pace is phenomenal. Like that's why they've hired him now, because like you can fix those things, but that core pace is like so impressive.
The raw pace is 100% there. There were definitely moments, especially in the Grand Prix, where I was thinking, why is he putting the car there? Like
it's like over defending.
Yeah, just getting so far onto the dirty stuff to defend a few times, and it was almost like he was being blue flagged and he was just trying to get out of the way. It was so weird sometimes. So
some odd choices.
There's definitely still stuff to learn in that regard, but I think the important bit, because the thing is one of the things that you really can't teach is the raw pace that is there, and that's shone through a little bit this weekend, which is good to see.
Did, Russell was out qualified by him for both races. He was only fifth on the grid for the Grand Prix, but he did the alternative strategy, started on the hards, which looked rough for quite a while. Like he was really struggling in the opening phase, but it paid off in the end because he took advantage of a VSC to come out just ahead of Verstappen, pick up his fourth podium in 6 races now for Russell. Just
consistent.
Continues to have he just seems to like just anonymously be getting these podiums. Like he's not really doing much flashy stuff. He's just like putting in good laps, like keeping good pace and picking up results.
He's just consistently sticking it in that top 5 kind of position, and it does mean that if someone ahead of them is not having a good weekend, like Verstappen struggled a little bit for pace in the race, so it allows George to be there to take advantage of that, and that's the best they can do. I mean, in reality, that car is probably better than the Red Bull in the grand scheme of things, but when you're competing against Max, it's an entirely different story. But if George is keeping that car in that 4th, 5th kind of sweet spot, when something's not going the way of either the McLarens or Verstappen, he's going to be there to clean up behind them. And that is what he's doing at the minute, and he's doing it really well. So,
yeah, I mean, Max was only really in any of the podium fights because of that lap in qualifying, which was another unbelievable lap to put off that.
Yeah, he just kind of fell backwards generally, didn't he? I mean, albeit not that far, but the race pace just wasn't there for them, unfortunately.
No, not at all. I mean, we saw him locking up and like missing apexes and stuff, which is not very often you see him doing that.
No, very uncharacteristic.
Yeah, he's now dropped 32 points off the championship lead, and actually only just ahead of Russell now. Russell's closed up on him quite a lot. But again, you just can't write him off. Like, despite all of that, he's still third in the championship. He's like within touching distance. One decent upgrade on that Red Bull, and he's still very much in the championship fight, I think.
Yeah.
And I think the same goes for Russell as well. Like, if Mercedes can bring an upgrade that moves them a step forward, like, I don't think you can write off either of them yet.
Yeah, definitely.
Tsunoda got into Q3 again, but only 10th on the grid. He was still 7/10 off Max. In the end, he finished 10th where he started. He managed to hold off Hadjar because he had a 5-second penalty, and I think he managed to keep hold of 10th by like
about a tenth,
about a tenth of a second. Yeah. Not great, not terrible, really, from Tsunoda.
I think what you're seeing is Tsunoda's capable of getting something out of the car, and he's probably maybe a little bit below where it should be. But I think the fact that Tsunoda is able to consistently get himself in that top 10 in quali and get that 1 lap pace out of it, and then, relatively speaking, hold position and not fall backwards from those starts. I think you're starting to see where that car realistically sits amongst the rest. So it looks like there's, generally speaking, the Mercedes is better, and then there's given weekends where the Ferraris could be better or could be worse. That's kind of where that Red Bull's sitting at the moment. And so it's like somewhere between third and fourth best, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe even a joint third between Mercedes, Ferrari, and or joint second, sorry, between the whole lot of them. But you're starting to see that the car's not as bad as it potentially looked at the start of the season, but it is still way off the pace of those at the front.
Yeah, it looks a handful.
Yeah.
This weekend, however, I think fourth fastest car was probably the Williams.
Williams looked really good this weekend.
So competitive all weekend. They lost their points in the sprint because Albon picked up a post-race penalty. I forget what that was for, actually. Quite a few drivers picked up penalty in the sprint. Because
it was about three of them, I think.
Just chaos.
Penalties.
I'm sure some of the Discord will tell us what that is. I forget off the top of my head. But in the Grand Prix, 5th and 9th for another nice big haul of points for them. Honestly, probably could have been even better than that. Like, they did look quicker than the Ferraris, but in the end, the Ferraris ended up in between them. They were racing each other quite a lot, which probably didn't help. At one point, I think Albon repassed Sainz, but apparently the team had told Sainz that Albon wasn't going to race him, but hadn't told Albon that yet. So Albon promptly overtook him, which is a bit iffy. Speeding behind the safety car, that's what the penalties were for.
Yeah.
Sainz also had that very clumsy attempt at a pass on Hamilton on the last lap, which was a bit messy. I think he was lucky to get away with a penalty there. But even so, like, such a good weekend for Williams. It's amazing how much they've improved this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, regardless of if it shouldn't have happened by what the team were asking, I think that Albon going past Sainz in the grand scheme of things was probably for the better, because he was faster at that point and he was able to sort of disappear down the road a little bit, attack people ahead, and to some degree bring Sainz with him. So I think that ultimately it probably worked out about right that Albon got out in front in the first place anyway, even if it was a little bit unplanned and maybe the opposite of what was planned. I think it worked out for the better for them overall. But yeah, some really good potential there. So it'd be good to see if that starts becoming consistent, or at least consistent enough that, you know, there's a handful of tracks where they can go and solidly challenge for points. Like, it might not be every single weekend, but if they can, tracks with certain characteristics and so on, if they can be handsomely in the points like they were this weekend, then that's going to do them the world of good going into next year.
Yeah. I mean, there's only one race this season they haven't scored in so far.
Yeah.
Which is, from where they were not that long ago, super impressive.
Yeah.
Less so at Ferrari, who were just pretty terrible all weekend, weren't they? I mean, where do we start with Ferrari?
It's just off the boil again. It's so hot and cold there at the minute, and this was freezing cold. Like, they were so far off. And then all the bickering back and forth between the two of them over the radio in the race, like,
such a mess.
Like, don't get me wrong, I get that Hamilton felt he was faster at the time and wanted to go ahead to try and stretch his legs and chase down whoever was in front at the time, but when he then basically couldn't drop Leclerc out of DRS range, more or less.
Yeah.
You knew after 5 to 10 laps of that and him not being able to drop Leclerc, the team are going to ask him to switch the positions back. Like, if he'd gone off down the road to fight somebody, great. But he was edging closer and closer. Was it Albon they were chasing? I think it wasn't it? Antonelli, sorry, yeah. And he was edging closer and closer to him, but it was like a tenth a lap, and there were about 15 laps left or something. So it was just never going to happen. So you can't be surprised when the team come back to you and say, right, we've tried. You're not making inroads. Let's switch. Let's invert the cars, switch them back, however they want to phrase it. And yeah, just the snide comment where it was like, okay, now just so you know, Sainz 1.4 behind you, and then the snarky remark of, oh, do you want me to let him through as well? It's like, come on, Lewis, grow up, man. You've been around long enough to know that if you can't make distance on your teammate and go attack the next guy like what you've said you want to try, you're going to be asked to swap it back. It just unnecessary. But then again, it's probably one of those things that do happen on a much more regular basis than we're aware of, and someone decided to air that message because it served a purpose.
It was a good message.
Yeah.
It's a good message to air.
Yeah.
The frustrating thing is, like, in the end, Leclerc finished like a second and a half off Antonelli. And I just feel like if at the point Hamilton had said, I'm faster, let me through, if they had either said yes or no at that point, it doesn't matter which, I think if they'd have like made a decision straight away and stuck to it, one of them would probably have caught Antonelli. Yeah. But they spent so long faffing around. Hamilton just took all the speed out of his medium tyres while they were having a committee meeting about it. So by the time we did get past, like you say, we straight away had Leclerc being like, hang on, why will I let him through? He's no quicker than me. Either way, whichever driver they have just let be ahead probably would have caught Antonelli. It was ludicrous.
It took far too long for the decision in the first place. Yeah. And like you say, that could have easily made the difference in whether either of them caught Antonelli or not. Definitely could have. Again, led to another classic bit of radio, a bit of sarcasm with something like, it's fine, I'll wait while you have a tea break or something. I can't remember exactly what it was word for word, but it was along those lines. I was like, come on, Lewis, they don't drink tea in Italy. If anything, it'd be like a cappuccino or something.
Yeah, go have a cappuccino break. Few other bits to wrap up, I guess. RB, as we said, Hajar finished just outside the points. Lawson involved in another collision in that first corner incident. He picked up some damage there that caused his retirement later on. Not great from them. What we can say, however, is their livery was fantastic this weekend.
The vibrant pink of like Miami sunset 80s vibe.
Yeah, but it had like the kind of Red Bull can silver on it, and like the wheel covers were like can lid. Like it was so nicely done.
It was done.
Like I love that they've turned up with a one-off pink livery and done a better car than Racing Point or Alpine have ever done. Yeah, like that's such a flex on the other pink team, which I really like. Speaking of Alpine, Doohan was also involved in that turn one collision and was out of the race. Reports in the press today from, these aren't just like websites you've never heard of, rumors, like pretty reputable sites reporting that Doohan is out of that car for Imola and that Colapinto is going to be in, which will be such a shame if that does happen.
It was circulating even before this weekend, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That it was likely to happen. There was all the rumours going into the season about him potentially having a 5-race deal. That seems possible, or maybe just slightly out with it being 6 races in, where we're seeing him dropped, if that ends up being the case. It's a weird one. Like, I can't... Unfortunately for Jack, it's hard to argue a case for him. Like, yes, it feels harsh after 5 or 6 races, but we've seen people hang around who have... I guess this is the thing, we've seen people hang around who have done much worse in some regards, but I don't think F1's in that place anymore where you get the luxury to just hang around. At the minute, there's that many people just waiting to get a seat that they're just chomping at the bit to get in a car. And a lot of them are fortunate enough to also be able to bring money as well as talent. And when you've got that double wham, then teams are going to be a lot more ruthless and chop and change a lot more, even outside of the Red Bull program. So
Yeah, and I mean it's got to be hard for him. Like he's clearly had next to no support from the team all season. I mean, in qualifying, like he ended up dropping back in the queue because I think they like let Gasly's car out ahead, and then like that delayed him or something. It was, you could tell then he was just like he felt like he was fighting against his own team. So
yeah, it was that they'd basically told Jack they were going to let Pierre go first, and then Pierre wasn't actually ready to go, and it ended up being that Doohan was held too long to even be able to do a lap for himself. If I remember right, is the way it played out.
Yeah, and then compromised his outlap and everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Shame.
Yeah. It is a shame because I think he's been very loyal to that team over the years, and I think he does deserve more time than he's had. I mean, he out qualified Gasly for the Grand Prix this weekend. Sadly didn't get out any further than turn one, but he's showing signs of improvement, but just not long enough to do it, I guess.
Yeah, it's a shame.
Anyone else we want to talk about? Ollie Bearman was another retire. Ollie Bearman had a pretty spectacular, a very old school engine failure. Actually, it was like chunks coming out of the exhaust pipe. You don't see many of those these days.
Yeah, classic, a true classic engine failure for Ollie.
Bit of a shame for him.
Bit of a mixed weekend all around for him as well. Like not so great in qualifying, but clawed good places back in the sprint, only to then have infringements that dropped him back down anyway. It was a bit hit and miss for him. Like great race pace and looking, to be fair, looking good in the Grand Prix as well. Like he gave me like really four places in the opening lap or something like that from the back of the grid. So he was off to a good start initially and he was running well, but then engine had enough.
Yeah. Yeah, that's about all's worth mentioning, I guess. I mean, there was a nice entertaining bit of television when we got lots of radio messages saying the rain is imminent, followed by Sauber bringing in Bortoletto for a nice fresh set of hards. Are you watching different radar to everybody else? Yeah. And Aston Martin were just awful again. I mean, and like lazy spins from Alonso as well, which is so like out of character for him. You just get the impression they've completely given up on this season.
It was a really weird one, that Alonso one. Like it just, it looked odd, but
yeah.
We
have to give a mention as well before we move on to what was supposed to be the driver parade, which turned into a race in the full-size Lego F1 cars. I just can't help feeling that like somebody on the Lego PR team who'd like come up with all of this just didn't consider for a second what putting racing drivers in cars and letting them drive the track themselves was inevitably going to turn into, because there were just chunks of Lego left behind on the track afterwards. So entertaining though. If you didn't see that on the pre-race, go and like find a replay of it.
It's definitely worth checking out. It was hilarious.
Yeah, really good. Should we do some awards?
Yeah, why not?
Driver of the day, who you got?
I mean, overall, for the race itself, I know we don't always like to just give it to a winner, but Piastri was pretty sort of another level kind of drive. I think there's a couple of honourable mentions up and down the grid for people who had really good races as well, such as Alexander Albon is probably a good shout. But I think just Oscar's that gap Oscar built as soon as he dropped Verstappen and got by Verstappen, and the fact that he got by Verstappen as quickly as he did, like that was a huge difference between the way his race played out compared to the way Lando's race played out. Like when I was saying about it before, it was just, that is why right now Oscar is the one that's got more wins under his belt, more wins this season and is leading the title. That's why he's in that position, because he's far more ruthless in those overtaking scenarios, and then gets the pedal down and goes and makes himself a gap. So I think, although there's a couple worth mentioning, I think it's harder for me to look past him this week.
I think Albon was the name I had in my head, but you have made a pretty convincing case for it being Oscar.
Out of interest, who won the shambles that is the real one this week? I didn't pay enough attention.
I dread to think. It was Oscar, apparently.
Oh, there you go then.
Yeah.
So
it just means everyone had him in their fantasy team, though.
Well, yeah. I mean, you'd be surprised if people don't put him in their fantasy team.
Well, yeah.
Generally speaking, if they can. So, yeah.
No, I can go along with you on that. We'll go for Piastri.
Okay.
Move of the day. There's a few potentials this race.
A few good ones. I mentioned the way Hamilton first demonstrated the switchback. I think it was on Hadjar when they were fighting each other. So that was a nice move into turn one, which we then saw Piastri repeat on Verstappen.
Yeah.
Both kind of played out the same way as well, where they sold it to the guy on the inside defending and basically caused them to lock up and make a mistake, and then just took advantage, like just braked a lot earlier than they needed to in order to get that switch back to work. But the one that stood out above them for me was the one where Norris very unconventionally got past, I want to say it was Russell at turn 4 by, from what I could tell, he basically decided to do a little bit of battery deployment somewhere where he would catch George Russell out and make that work around turn 4, which I thought was really good to see. But then I sort of thought, if you can do that with George, Lando, and like think outside the box, why is it whenever you're fighting Max or somebody or Oscar, it feels like you do the same thing on repeat until it works? Yeah. Whereas in that situation with George, he had this like little alternate attempt and made it work like that. But that one stood out to me because it was a little unconventional, and you don't really see anybody doing that kind of thing there.
I guess it's possible that when he was behind George, he wasn't really needing to deploy as much battery in order to stay close to him, so he kind of had more to spare, whereas chasing Verstappen, he was maybe having to deploy more around the rest of the lap.
Yeah, just
could
stay
be something
with him.
like that.
Yeah. I mean, another classic wily old Hamilton move was him getting past Sainz while Leclerc was busy tangling up with him. I thought genuinely thought Hamilton was about to get both of them at one point, but I mean,
Crofty literally started saying, "And through goes Hamilton again," and then had to stop himself because he didn't get them both.
Of course.
Yeah, that one was fun because it like started in the final hairpin and then kind of carried on down the pit straight into turn 1, which was quite good.
Yeah. So a lot of candidates, which is surprising for Miami, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there was Albon and Antonelli as well, which is another one of those. Put them offline into turn 1 and take advantage. I'm tempted to say Norris on Russell just because of how unconventional it was. I think that showed some kind of clever racecraft to make that work. So that was
my prime candidate coming into the show. So
yeah. And then final award.
Honestly, what the are we doing here?
I mean, we've talked about Ferrari's driver management techniques this weekend. You've mentioned Carlos Sainz dive bombing Lewis Hamilton already. That's another one.
Someone in the Discord suggested Toto Wolff in a t-shirt, which just looked wrong.
Fair. What else have we got? I mean, a lot has been said about that Ferrari livery this weekend.
Oh my god!
Do you know? Again, I love using Emily as like a point of, she doesn't always watch the races with me, but sometimes she does, and then she always has like a belter of, if it's that obvious to someone who doesn't watch the sport religiously, you know you've got a problem.
Yeah.
And she literally turned to me and went, "There's far too much blue on that Ferrari this year," and I was just like, I can't even bother to get into it's a special livery. I was just like, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
It was just
There was a phase of the race, I think it was when Hamilton was trying to pass Sainz, and it went on for several laps. And I literally said, I wish he would get this move done so we have to stop looking at that car. Because the Ferraris hadn't really been on screen that much up until that point. And you sort of forgot how bad that car looks. And then all of a sudden, it was all we saw for several laps.
Yeah.
It's so bad. Especially when they've done this before as well. They spend the whole week like teasing, like, oh, there's going to be some blue this time. Like, oh, here's the race suits and the merchandise. It's all nice and blue. And then what do? They make the HP logos even bigger. Like,
yeah. They just make
so
bigger
bad.
HP logos. That's it.
So bad. I mean, someone also mentioned the Red Bull pit stop in the sprint was a pretty big balls up.
Yeah, that's a pretty big one. Just because of the, like, even bigger ramifications than usual. Like, that meant Antonelli just completely missed his stop altogether.
Yeah.
Like, because he couldn't get into the box and had to essentially carry on down the pit lane.
They messed up so bad, they gave another driver a drive-through penalty.
Yeah. Shouldn't laugh, but I think if you didn't laugh, you'd cry.
Yeah, and as Disco have just said, Kimi did well just to not have a bigger crash or spear into his pit.
Kind of,
it was dangerous.
Luckily, I think he saw in that split second moment, he saw that the Red Bull was being released and had already started making his evaded action, because I think Max ended up making contact with his rear right, wasn't it? It was like Max's front wing and front left into Kimi's rear right. So he'd clearly already seen it unfolding and had his wits around him. But yeah, that could have ended a lot nastier than it did. So that is quite lucky.
I think it has to be the Ferrari livery for me, though.
Fine.
It's just like such a... I don't know. I just can't.
It's just an open goal miss, isn't it? Like, you don't have to do anything significant to a Ferrari livery. Or if you're going to hint at the blue, do a blue car. Like,
yeah, exactly.
It's just
right.
Crazy.
Do you want to take us through some predictions?
Yes, we'll do some predictions and some fantasy. So, predictions. We had 3 people score 3 points this week in some slightly different combinations. We'd got Paul Dorsey, Jennifer Bailey, and Gabby Lamberti all scored 3 points with, like I say, slightly different combinations. Up at the top of the leaderboard, Gordon Barham and Jason Suter are tied on 11 points. So all very tight at the top there. We didn't do all that well, Chris, I must admit. We got 1 point each. You got your Doohan and I got my Verstappen pole. So we saw the future in some ways, but the rest of it we were just miles off. I think there was only, I've not got the names, but I think there's only either 1 or 2 people who had the faith in Albon and went with 5th. So some people did get that right. So well done to you. But I don't have the names to hand to be able to directly congratulate you. But if you are one of those people, well done. If you want to see where you fared or where you are in the standing, just head to backofthegrid.com and all the results are up there, and obviously the leaderboard is on there. And if you're just hearing this and you're newer to the show and you want to get involved, while you're there, register, because then you'll be able to play from Emilia Romagna in Imola weekend after. And it's always worth doing. If you get 5 out of 5, there is a prize. Over into the fantasy side of things, in the official F1 fantasy game, Third Coast Motors were our winner this week with 393 points, and Northern Ballymore still leads the way overall with 1,374 points. And then
I would like to point out that I had my best week of F1 fantasy I think I've ever had as well. I was third this week, which I'm very happy with. Well done. Mostly because I used the power up thing that lets you just
put whoever you want in.
Put whoever you want in, yeah. So I went big, and it paid off quite well.
To be fair, Third Coast Motors did exactly the same team.
Yeah.
Had an all McLaren and Mercedes team with Max backing it up, which...
It's exactly what I did, yeah. Unfortunately, Max ended up scoring next to no points because of...
But yeah, there you go. And then over in GridRival, Acme Racing Co. won this week with 1,088 points. That's our second win. Maybe not in a row for Acme Racing, but it's... I've definitely mentioned that name once before this season.
Yeah, so familiar.
We've had that one a couple of times. But overall, Crusty Union still leads the way with 5,957. If you're interested in the fantasy leagues as well as the predictions league, then again, they're on the website at backofthegrid.com. We do also have an IndyCar fantasy league for GridRival this year. So again, head there if you want to get involved with any of those things. But that is it from Prediction Fantasy Corner. Back to you, Chris, in the studio.
We've got some breaking news actually that's just been dropped in the Discord.
It's a good job I handed back to the studio then, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Perfect timing. Apparently, Audi's F1 engine boss has left by mutual agreement in yet another bit of restructuring in that team, which is it's just not sounding. I've got so much more faith in Cadillac than I have in Audi at this point in time, which I didn't think for a moment I'd be saying a year or two ago. I mean, obviously made easy by the fact that Cadillac are going to be using engines from a proven manufacturer, but not good for Audi. Not good at all.
No. It's one of those things, isn't it, where you start thinking, like, are they going to end up in trouble before they've even started? It's a little unnerving, I guess.
Yeah, and are they going to end up being around for a few years, not achieving much, and then
just disappear?
The board lose interest.
Yeah,
worrying. The joy of having an extra team on the grid might not last very long the way things are going with them, but
yeah. I mean, Cadillac were around at Miami this week, though, weren't they? They did some.
They were, yeah.
Bits of publicity and everything like that, with it being the first race in the US this season.
Did they actually announce anything?
They unveiled a new logo, should I say, pronounce it properly, and it was basically just a Cadillac logo, but black and white, I think.
Yeah. Like there was so much build up and like all this talk. Oh, Perez is going to be there. Are they going to announce him? And then people were like, "Oh, well, they've been posting loads on Instagram, and Mick Schumacher and Valtteri Bottas have been liking all their posts, and maybe they're going to get announced." And they just seem to just kind of have a party and go, "We're Cadillac. Thanks for coming."
I've just put it out there. Like, if you were a racing driver who wanted a seat, of course you're going to like all the posts and be around. Like, it doesn't mean anything. Like, come on.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically, I'm pretty sure that they just unveiled a logo. I keep saying unveiled. I don't know why. They unveiled a logo that was just the normal Cadillac logo, but like
without the gold
grayscale. Yeah, it was just like black and white grayscale kind of thing.
Sky F1 had Graham Loudon on during one of the practice sessions, who is their team principal. Those of you who've been watching F1 for a few years might remember him from the old Virgin Manor Marussia
man.
Yeah. And that was very interesting. So he was saying they're going to be operating out of 3 locations. They're building a new base at Silverstone. They have a base in Indianapolis and another one in Charlotte, I think. So it's going to be kind of a 3 location thing, and they're like developing all these locations. I think they've said they've just kind of finished their first chassis for what will be next year's car. Although they're going to be finding ways of doing some testing before they've built the new car, just to have kind of drivers and engineers having some experience working together and stuff. It was an interesting chat, and he's a guy with a lot of like motorsport history. He's a really good person for them to have on board, I think. So he also talked down the need for them to have an American driver as well, which I thought was quite interesting. They kind of asked him about Perez and Bottas and other drivers, and he said like it would be nice to have an American driver, but it's not something we are saying has to happen.
It's one of those things, isn't it? Like, it would be nice to have an American driver in the car, but are you really going to give up an opportunity at a driver that's more proven and going to be faster? Like, it's, you've got to go for what's best at the time, haven't you? And like, it's not like people in America are not going to be able to identify with Cadillac as a brand, is it?
Exactly.
Like, it's not like a a European-based team trying to attract an American audience. Like Cadillac as a brand is huge. They don't need an American driver. So yeah.
Anyway, that was a little extra aside, but I think that about does us for this week. So yeah, got a weekend off next weekend, but we'll be back in a week's time to preview the Imola Grand Prix. What might end up being the last Imola Grand Prix for some time, if rumours are to be believed. But we can discuss that next week.
We'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, in the meantime, if you want to get in touch with us, we're in all the usual places. Backgrid.com if you want to see how you're doing in Predictions League or find links to join any of the fantasy leagues. But I think that will do for now. So thanks everyone for listening. And until next time, goodbye.
Bye, Ram.